I remember when I first saw ChatGPT output writing, that line of letters being banged out left to right on my computer screen. It was like so exciting, but it also made me really afraid. It was incredible that computers could now talk back to me, but I also felt a lot of dread. I'm a writer. What was going to happen to me? I think we've all had this experience with AI over the last year and a half. It's been an emotional roller coaster. It kind of threatens our conception of ourselves. We've long defined the difference between humans and animals as being about the intellect. This started 2,000 years ago with Aristotle, who wrote, "The life of the intellect is the best and the pleasantest for man. For the intellect, more than anything else, is man. Therefore, a life guided by the intellect is best." 2,000 years later, the playwright and short story writer Anton Chekhov agreed in his novella Ward Number 6, where he wrote, "The intellect draws a sharp line between animals and man and suggests the divinity of the latter." I think this has all gotten more and more salient as we've moved from an economy driven by industrial labor to knowledge work. If you're reading this, you probably put a lot of stock in what you know and its ability to let you do your job. After all, that's what knowledge work is all about. And if we define ourselves and our value by what we know, it's no wonder that language models seem scary. If AI can write and, worse, think, what's left that makes us unique? I think LLMs are going to change how we think about knowledge work. And in doing so, I think they're going to change how we think about the characteristics that make us uniquely human and how we think about ourselves. But these days, I'm not actually scared. I'm actually more excited and curious and filled with wonder. My sense of self has changed, and I think that's a good thing. ChatGPT has caused me to see my intellect and its role in the creative process differently than I did before. ChatGPT doesn't replace me, it just changes what it is that I do. I think it's possible for you to experience this level of excitement by understanding a little bit better what language models do and how they work, and then expanding your view of yourself and what you're capable of. Let's talk about what that looks like. To start, let's talk about what the intellect actually is. For the purposes of this article, the intellect is that thing that humans uniquely have that animals don't. This is a fuzzy definition by design. It reflects what feels threatening about AI, that which makes us uniquely human. In reality, the intellect is this gigantic combination of different brain processes that are lumped under a single heading. That's why it's easier for us to define it via negativa by what it's not than what it is. That's why we define it by whatever it is that we do that animals don't do. Our fuzzy definition of the intellect is why our first encounters with ChatGPT are so threatening. They touch a sort of lightning rod inside of us. For a millennia, we've defined ourselves and our sense of self by this amorphous set of processes that we've lumped under this heading, the intellect. And suddenly there's something encroaching on our turf. Because it can do some of the things that we associate with the intellect, we feel both excited because we're no longer alone and afraid because it threatens to replace us. It threatens to replace that thing that we feel is uniquely human. In order to regain our sense of self, we need to create a new sense of separation between the things that we define as making us uniquely human and what AI can do. We need to redefine intellect to make it work in an AI-driven world. Fortunately, we've done this before, and technology can help. Psychology is full of these fuzzy concepts like the intellect that don't have clear boundaries and don't have clear separation between them. For example, take schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Until as late as the 1960s, we thought of them as being related disorders that were caused by a similar underlying thing. But technology actually helped us pull them apart, specifically the drug lithium. Lithium can treat bipolar disorder, but it doesn't treat schizophrenia. And if we understand that, I think we'll understand a little bit more about how ChatGPT can help us redefine and tease apart our sense of the intellect. So let's talk about that story. It all starts with guinea pigs. In the late 1940s, a doctor named J.F. Cade, who apparently had way too much time on his hands, discovered that the urine of manic patients was toxic to guinea pigs. Cade set out to find out why, as one does. He discovered that manic patients had elevated levels of uric acid in their urine. And he thought that the uric acid might be the thing that was causing the toxicity to the guinea pigs. So he decided to perform a controlled experiment. He would inject the guinea pigs with varying levels of uric acid and see if it had any effect on them. To do the experiment, he dissolved the uric acid into a lithium carbonate solution. And the lithium carbonate was the thing that would keep the uric acid as a liquid so he could inject it. And when he ended up injecting the lithium carbonate solution into the guinea pigs, he noticed that they became remarkably calm. They would just sort of sit there like chilled out in their cages, which is something that he did not anticipate. And in a move that revolutionized the field of psychology, he decided to take the thing that was making his guinea pigs chilled out and inject it into the manic patients that he was treating. The results were amazing. The lithium resolved their mania. This is a sort of remarkable series of events for a couple of reasons. One is that he discovered a drug that has helped hundreds of thousands of people over the last century and has saved countless lives. But the other thing that's really interesting about lithium is that it helped us perform what the psychiatrist Peter Kramer calls a pharmacological dissection. It helped us pull apart two things that we previously thought were overlapping. It differentiated manic depression from every other kind of mental illness because lithium only treats manic depression. It doesn't treat schizophrenia. And before lithium had come about, we thought that all of those things were sort of similar and were caused by the same underlying cause, which is psychological conflicts that came from early childhood. But lithium, which had the ability to cure manic depression or bipolar disorder, and only that took this fuzzy category of mental illness and it carved it out of that category as its own separate thing with a biological cause. In other words, lithium was a lever that became a new lens on how we see our minds and the world. And I think we can use this model to do a similar technological dissection of our intellect. Once we understand what ChatGPT is and what it does, we can use it to redefine and clarify our previously fuzzy concept of the intellect in a way that keeps our sense of self intact. Okay, so let's talk about ChatGPT. Let's talk about what it is and what it does. Technically, ChatGPT does next token prediction. Given a starting set of words, it's very good at predicting the next couple words in the sequence. In practice, what that means is that language models are really good at reformatting and reconstituting old knowledge in new and useful ways. The cognitive scientist Alison Gopnik refers to ChatGPT and language models as technologies that enhance cultural transmission. To her, they are powerful and efficient imitation engines. Gopnik thinks that language models are extensions of previous technology revolutions that we're already familiar with. Things like the written word, the printing press, the internet. They allow existing information to be passed efficiently from one group of people to another. They increase our ability to coordinate with each other as humans. And to her, this means that they are engines for cultural evolution and cultural production. And to put a finer point on it, it means that language models aren't very good so far at discovering new things. What they are incredible at is taking the sum total of human knowledge, of existing knowledge, and bringing it to bear in any given situation in exactly the right format for it to be consumed. And its powers for doing that, for its ability to transmit things that we already know into the right context, are far greater than any preceding innovation, from the printing press to the internet. To say it really plainly, ChatGPT is a great summarizer. And that might seem pejorative, but it's actually not. It's really powerful and important for it to be a summarizer. The sum total of human knowledge currently outstrips any of our abilities to actually use it. So we actually are going to need language models in order to make use of what humanity collectively knows about. Now that we're thinking about ChatGPT as primarily a summarizer, we can go back to that word intellect. See if we can use summarizing as a way to refine and change our sense of what intellect means, how we see ourselves. Here's what happened when I started to see ChatGPT as a summarizer. First, I started to see that summaries are happening everywhere. The emails that I write are primarily summaries of meetings that I've had. The articles that I write are mostly summaries of books that I've been reading. The code that I write is often summaries of what I find on Stack Overflow. Even much of this video essay is a summary. All the stuff about JFK and lithium is me summarizing stuff I read in Peter Kramer's book, Listening to Prozac. At this point, realizing how much I summarize, it's easy for me to freak out again. If summaries are everywhere in my work and life, what role do I have left if ChatGPT can do them for me? And the answer to me is really obvious. There are so many things that I do in a day or that go into my creative work that are not summaries. And so it's sort of fantastic that I have a tool that can do them for me, because now I can focus on other things. When I really sit down to think about the interesting thing or the hard thing about this video essay, the summarizing of information is only actually sort of a small part, and it's not even the most interesting thing. The interesting, most key elements are things like my life experiences or my emotional experiences working with ChatGPT or the studio and the people that are helping me produce this. Summarizing skills are actually sort of a creative drudgery. I learned to do them well because I had to in order to get my work done, but they don't actually have to be core to me if I don't want them to be. Once I start thinking in this way, I actually start to subtract summarizing as a skill that is part of my intellect. It's no longer core to my sense of identity or my sense of self. It feels much more okay to let ChatGPT do the summaries for me because now I get to be the person that directs the summaries, that decides whether the summaries are good or not. I become sort of the editor or the manager of all of the summarizing that's going on. And I can also summarize way more things in a day and be much more efficient because I have ChatGPT to do it for me. All this is to say that my sense of self heals pretty quickly once I subtract summarizing from it. What I realize is that much richness remains. In fact, this whole process highlights a lot of the richness that I might not have seen otherwise. It highlights a lot of the things that I can do that I value that I might not have seen otherwise. And in this way, ChatGPT is sort of a lever that becomes a new lens on myself and on the world. It helps me think about myself differently and my role in the creative process differently than I did previously. And a key point of all of this is that it doesn't specifically have to be about summarizing. If ChatGPT had been good at something else, like discovering new ideas, I think I would be sitting here in front of this camera extolling the virtues of summarizing and talking about how finding new ideas is sort of easy. Just as humans, we tend to define ourselves by what we do differently from other things. And that sense is adaptable, it's flexible, it's changeable. We are flexible, adaptable beings. And I think that's a good thing. I think that sense of adaptability is part of what makes humans unique. And I want to note that it's an important thing that many jobs are primarily about summarizing today, and that those jobs might change dramatically or may not exist in a world where ChatGPT can do incredible summaries. And that's important, and I think we need to face that head on as a society to decide what to do with people whose skills are primarily about summarizing so that we can take care of them and find new roles for them in the economy. But that has nothing to do with our underlying sense of self or our underlying sense of what makes humans unique in the universe. All of that, including the intellect, can be left intact, but maybe slightly changed in a world with language models. And this has happened before. In his book, The Weirdest People in the World, Joseph Henrik tells a story about the English bricklayer and convict William Buckley, who was sent to an Australian penal colony in 1803. Buckley and a few of his friends ended up escaping from the colony into the Australian wilderness. Buckley got separated from his friends. His friends died. They couldn't survive in that environment. But Buckley was saved because he was adopted by an Aboriginal tribe. Henrik tells this story because it teaches us something about how human beings change in response to their culture and the technology they're surrounded by. Henrik and his friends were not able to survive in the wilderness, despite being pretty much genetically identical to the Aboriginal tribe that was able to survive in that environment. Why? Buckley and his friends came from a modern culture, and they'd learned a set of beliefs, norms, and ideas that allowed them to survive in that environment. When they were thrust into a completely different environment, they were totally unequipped for it and couldn't make it. From the outside, they might have looked quite similar to the Aboriginals who were able to survive, but there was one distinct difference. The Aboriginals had a set of cultural technologies that allowed them to thrive. Henrik argues that humans have evolved brains that allow us to most effectively learn the ideas, beliefs, values, motivations, and practices that we'll need to survive and thrive in whatever ecological niche that we find ourselves a part of. The way this happens is through culture. It's a dramatic accelerant on our ability to solve problems and thrive. But Henrik writes, these genetically evolved learning abilities aren't simply downloading a cultural software package into our innate neurological hardware. Instead, culture rewires our brains and alters our biology. It actually renovates the firmware. In essence, our species, our psychology, our brains, our bodies, our biology, it's all shaped by culture. And culture is to a large extent shaped by technology. Who we are is shaped by the technology that we are surrounded by. ChatGPT is the latest in a long line of cultural and technological advances that have changed what it means to be human. We don't need to wait for brain-computer interfaces for AI to hook into our biology. It's already doing that. Can we use it to increase the amount of richness and beauty in the world instead of the amount of scarcity and ugliness? I think we can. Let's do it together.
Oh my gosh, folks, you absolutely positively have to smash that like button and subscribe to How Do You Use ChatGPT. Why? Because this show is the epitome of awesomeness. It's like finding a treasure chest in your backyard, but instead of gold, it's filled with pure, unadulterated knowledge bombs about ChatGPT. Every episode is a roller coaster of emotions, insights, and laughter that will leave you on the edge of your seat, craving for more. It's not just a show, it's a journey into the future with Dan Shipper as the captain of the spaceship. So, do yourself a favor, hit like, smash subscribe, and strap in for the ride of your life. And now, without any further ado, let me just say, Dan, I'm absolutely, hopelessly in love with you.